In this video, we'll be covering the new event template configuration. This template was updated in December of 2021 and is fundamentally different than the old version of the event template. We'll cover how to preview the template. You do need to log in and select certain things. Certain screens won't work in mobile view. We'll cover most of the screens and their functions. We won't cover every screen because many of the screens are standard across our templates. We'll go through how to use the admin section of the app to add data. We will go through most of what you can and can't change in the app through the edit mode. And then lastly, we will also go through how to add data in bulk through the data source manager if you need to add multiple items at once. If you have worked with the event template previously in Fliplet Studio, this is fundamentally different in several ways, so please pay attention. First and foremost, you have a registration screen. Again, the big difference in this app is that registration is for the entire app, meaning they could have access to multiple events with these details. So please be careful in choosing these. This is a regular form field that you can configure in edit mode and change the fields as you need to, but you do need to make sure that it's visible on the attendees and speakers screen, this different information you want to include. Login is very standard. I won't go through how to add that. We do have some details for you to get started, and you will need to start by logging in with an admin account. So it's just admin@email.com and the password admin. And the login is successful. The other thing I should note in this app, when you are in preview mode, you always need to have an event selected from the event list. That's because most of the screens in the app are dependent on a particular event. So if you don't select an event, it will kick you back to this screen. Instead, I'm going to start with the admin menu, then we'll go into some event-specific things. In the admin menu, now that I'm logged in as an admin, I see that button. You shouldn't need to configure or edit anything here. Other users will be able to register, and then you can come in here and edit them. And if you need to set someone as another admin, you can go in and do that here and just select them as an admin. Setting them as an event manager is done when you set up a new event, which we'll go through shortly. Admins get access to the app as a whole, meaning they can change any event. Event managers only get access to one or several specific events that they are selected for. So if I go back to this, if we add a new event, you can see here we have a list of events, and I can close these. This means that it is kind of hidden for all of the users in the app, but the data and everything stays there. You can also delete the event completely, which will remove all of the data associated with it. You'll see you get this warning that lists basically everything is deleted. Not the users, of course. Those, again, are for the whole app, not a specific event. But if I want to add a new event here, give the event a name, start date, end date, doesn't really matter, start time and end time, a location, an image if you'd like to include it. The event type, so open means anyone that has access to the app will be able to see the app instantly. Access requested means they'll have to request access, they'll be able to see it, and then they'll have to request access to get into the event. Private means you have to add them ahead of time. They won't even see it in the list. You won't really be able to change these without modifying code in several places, so I would not recommend trying to change this. The other fields you can change, and you'd really, again, just have to adjust how they're displayed in the event list screen. And then the event managers, this is just meant to be a comma-separated list of users that exist in the app that will be added to the event as event managers. And as the admin, you'll also have access to it. So these people will be able to change items specifically for the event, such as the agenda and more of that. Back in the admin menu, manage awards. So awards are shown to users the first time they interact with certain features in the app, such as subscribing to notifications, liking an event info post, etc. this kind of pops up an alert that shows them why they got an award and a little confetti, and it awards them points. And you can adjust the points and have leaderboards shown for each of the different events, even though the confetti in the pop-up that a user sees is only shown the first time they do it. So in here you can see we've selected what the kind of icon looks like for this, the title, what screen it's used on, a description of how they achieve it, and then these colors are used in that icon, the points that they're awarded, and then a message for why they're given the award. And you can edit all of that in here. For the icon, you need to use Font Awesome, which the URL is right here. You can just look that up, and they basically all start with FA- and then put the icon you want to use. And then for the two colors, you need to use hex codes without a hash character, so just the 6 digits. And then the description of the award, how they achieve it. So you actually have to select the screen and select the action that is taken. You can see we have a few added there. If you needed to add more actions, it would need to be done in code, so I would recommend reaching out to us. The points, why they received it, again, just text, and then order. If you want to organize the list in a particular way, you can order them just with a simple number system. Okay, and that's how to configure awards for the whole app. Back to the admin menu. The last thing here that is exclusive for admins is exporting data. So if you needed to export data for a particular event, you can do that, and you have access to these data sources. So you can export them, and then you could also re-import them if you needed to kind of copy an event over. And now let's go ahead and go into kind of the main screens of the app. So again, when you're in Fliplet Studio, there is a difference between the kind of mobile view and the web view, or the desktop view. If I click on one of these screens, one of these events from the mobile view, I'm taken to the event info screen. You can see how the screens are broken up here. Now this is like our standard event. I won't go through this in detail right now. This is just a list from data source component that lets you post items for the event. This is typically thought to be more for an in-person event. That's why we have it be the first screen on mobile. If I go back to the event list and I look at it on a desktop size screen, now when I select an event, it takes me to the reception screen. Now it also throws an error. So when you first add the template to your app, you do need to publish it as a web app so certain features work. Fundamentally, the reception and sessions screen require that it be published as a web app. So you can really quickly just go to publish and publish the app. And now that the event is published, I can go back and reload this screen, and everything will load properly now. So you can see we have the event title, the date and time, the next upcoming session is listed here automatically. All of this is automatic. If you look at it in edit mode, you really won't be able to change anything. It literally just says preview and has some kind of a placeholder session there. These items as well are what we call iframes, and you can ignore some of the strange formatting that happens here. These are pulling from the relevant screen. So the agenda just pulls from the agenda screen. The event info just pulls from the event info screen. So you won't be able to configure the elements on this screen. If you do want to change out one of the items, say for example you didn't want to use discussions, it does require some code, so we recommend reaching out to the support team and we will help you set that up. The items in the top bar menu as well can be changed in HTML code, but they are on multiple screens. Again, this is designed to have a different menu for the desktop version as opposed to the bottom menu bar of the mobile version. The other thing you can notice is if I do manually visit this screen when I'm on mobile, it basically just has placeholder text that says this screen doesn't work on this size of a device, so you need to make sure that you preview it on a larger device, and typically you kind of need to go back to the event list and refresh it there so it knows what event it's for. Now the session screen, it's mostly placeholders. So if you visit the event screen, you can see the sidebar in the top menu and just placeholder text, and it's a little bit of a strange formatting. This window is meant to put a URL for YouTube or Vimeo, which is in the data. I'll show that a little later. If you needed to use a different system such as Zoom, please again reach out to Fliplet, as we'll need to help you configure that. But the point of the session screen is when I'm on a reception, I click an item in the agenda and that loads that session. So this would have everything I've associated with that session, the materials, polls, questions, etc. But this is the video as well that's specific to this session. Now we've just put a placeholder YouTube video in here, but again, if you modify the data, you'll be able to put the links for relevant videos in here. Okay. Speaking of data, let's go back to the mobile view and go to the Event Manager menu, and I'll jump in Preview. So again, as an event manager, if a user visits the settings screen, they'll see this button. It'll only show for people that are event managers, and you'll have a menu which again are mostly just basic forms to allow you to configure the users specific to this event, the event info, agenda materials, etc. So we'll go through a few of these really quick. So again, this list of users is going to be limited to the ones that have access to this event. You can add new users. You can also bulk import users. When you bulk import users, you need to use a CSV export, and you'll have to import all of the same types of users at the same time. So all of your speakers, and then you'll need to use a separate sheet for all of your exhibitors and a separate sheet for all of your attendees. If you import users and they already exist in the app, by default, it will not overwrite any of their data. So if, for example, me, Brett Johnson, I've already signed up for your app, and you try to import my data, it would basically ignore everything, but what it would do is give me access to this event. So it would write in the security to give me access. But you can also optionally overwrite any data that exists. So any data I had filled out through the app would be overwritten by whatever you've put in this spreadsheet. And once you click Add Users, it will go through and do that. Okay, and back to the Event Manager menu. Manage Event Info, again, very straightforward, a simple list. You'll click a plus button, you'll add the data. These columns or these fields can be very easily changed and will map to columns in the data. And again, you just have to adjust how that looks for users on the regular event info screen. The agenda does have a few custom features in configuring. Let me show you that. So if I add a new agenda session, title, date, start and end time, location in the venue. If you do have an event, a physical event, and you have a floor plan screen, which we'll go through in a little bit, you need to make sure that this name, whatever this location is, let's say it's room 101, you need to make sure that this exact string is used as the marker in the floor plan, and I'll show you that shortly. Associated materials, if there's material specific to this session, you just check this button, and then when we add the materials in the next section, we will choose the session that it's added to, so whatever session name I gave. Optional, if you're going to have sessions that not everyone should see in the agenda, you can mark a session as optional, and then when you add users, you add what sessions they can see. We'll show you that again shortly. Speakers, we would just have a comma-separated list of the speakers that are associated with this session. These emails need to exist in your data, and then they will show up inside the session with their name, their photo, their title, those fields added automatically. Session buttons, so if you have questions or a survey associated with the session, you need to give the screen name, and that's the literal screen name here on the left. So we use session, survey, and questions as our examples, but you may have multiple and have them be different for different sessions, but you need to give the screen name that's listed in Fliplet as the screen name here, and it will link to that. Live polling is an automatic screen. that is configured through this form. So you won't modify the actual poll screen itself, you'll just modify the data. So you can have 2 questions and then possible answers. You just list them here. So let's do a simple example of what is your favorite color. And after each answer, you just hit the enter key, and that will distinguish it as a separate answer. And I can have a second question, or I can leave that empty. Session URL, so again, this is the URL for the embedded section. YouTube and Vimeo should work fine. Zoom, you may need to tweak. Again, you can reach out to us. And again, also on the session screen, what buttons do you want to show on that side menu? So just really quickly, I'll jump back. We have these options here. If I jump back to the reception screen, on WebView, and I click the agenda, you can see these are the options here. So those options that you select when setting up the agenda are basically allowing these buttons to appear on the right-hand side. Okay, and that's it. Then you'd be able to save that session, and that'll get added to the agenda. Oops. Let's go back to the Event Manager menu. Again, the materials, when you add materials, you will associate it with a session here. If you start typing, it'll show you a list of all of your sessions, so you can just pick one. And then if you want an item to be kind of highlighted on the materials screen, you'll just mark it as popular, and that will show, if we jump back to a materials screen, it'll show up here at the top. You probably only want to have 3 or 4 items max, and then everything else can fall under the All Resources section. So we'll go back to users, and if you come in and edit a user, it will take you to this screen. It won't let you edit, again, some of this information because it's shared across multiple events. So we don't want you to change like their location and have it change in another event where it may not be relevant. So a lot of these fields are listed here, but they are read-only. The only things you'll be able to edit is the type of user, and they can have multiple types, so you could be an attendee and a speaker. If someone's listed as other, they basically won't show up in the attendees and speakers screen or be able to have access as an exhibitor, but they'll still have regular access throughout the app. And then the personalized agenda, basically you'll be able to type in again here any sessions that were marked as optional. So you'll need to add the sessions first. And now I have 2 optional sessions. And if this user is supposed to go to both of them, I can go ahead and just select both. And now when this user logs in and looks at the agenda screen, they'll be able to see these 2 kind of hidden items. Okay. Manage exhibitors. A couple of things on exhibitors. So users can be exhibitors. You saw how we just had the ability to add someone as an exhibitor, but the list of exhibitors is for the companies. So the individuals would belong to the company. Like for example, I would have access to Fliplet, and the reason for that is when an attendee visits an exhibitor screen, they can come in here and request a meeting with this exhibitor. When I click that button, it takes me to a simple form, but this is going to send my logged in email, my name, and the company to the exhibitor. So when I'm logged in as an exhibitor, I'll be able to see the request from my specific company. So when you set up an exhibitor, you need to make sure that you're setting up the company here, and then at the very bottom, you're giving that comma-separated list of the users in the app that may have been listed as exhibitors. Basically we'll have access to see those meeting requests. Okay. The other part of the exhibitors is the booth. So this is very similar to the agenda being linked to the floor plan. If you have a physical in-person event and you have booths for exhibitors, you need to make sure you always start this field with the word exhibitor and then you can kind of add whatever you want. Maybe it's booth 1, 2, 3, something like that. And then again, this exact string has to be added as a marker in the floor plan. Okay, and that should be it for exhibitors. The leaderboard, so again, this is associated with awards. I can see the top 10 people in the app here as people that have engaged with the app, and then the top 10 commenters, so people that have commented on the event info or discussions or wherever you have comments enabled. I can reset the scores at any time, so again, just specific to this event, their scores will reset to 0. And the only other unique feature of this template I want to cover really quickly is the attendee check-in. So this is again a list of the attendees for this event, and you can come in here and click check-in, and that will record the date and time of when they checked in, and then you'll also be able to check them out if you need to do that as well. Again, it'll record that, and that'll be saved in the user list data, so you'll be able to export that if you need a list of that information. And that is it for the Event Manager menu. So once you've added most of your data and set all of that up, there's really only a couple of things to do in edit mode of Studio to configure different items. So as I mentioned, the poll screen, again, is kind of a placeholder. It's meant to be dynamic from that data you've set up, so you shouldn't need to change anything here. And I would be careful trying to change anything here because you may break this functionality. The session, survey, and the question screens can be fully customized however you need to. We just use a very simple form component, and we make sure that it's writing to a session data source. There are a couple of hidden fields that we don't want you to edit. The session and the event ID. So this is going to make sure that when someone comes in and fills out this survey for a session, that we're recording what event it's for and what specific session it's for, so that you can see that this survey was done for that specific session. We're also recording the user's email. But these other questions you can change. You can have different screens for different sessions if you need to. Very similarly, questions, same kind of a deal, form component with these hidden fields. We just have a very generic ask a question form. You can modify that as you see fit. Okay. Attendees and speakers, you shouldn't need to change much here, but if you do have data that you want to change, this is a standard list from data source component. You would come in and change the data view settings if you've changed the registration form, for example. And exhibitors, materials, discussions, all of those would be changed in the exact same way. They're all list from data source components. So if you change the columns or the data, and you want to change how that's displayed to users, you would just use those data view settings, which we have more on in the Help Center. The Request a Meeting screen also, again, is one very simple form field for users, but it is recording a lot of data in the back end. That's why we have all of these hidden fields. I would not recommend modifying these, just to make sure that that functionality of requesting a meeting only goes to the particular sponsor that it's supposed to be for. But you can modify these visible fields if you want to show it more information. If you don't want to automatically include things like the attendee's name and company, you could unhide these fields and allow users to edit them or things like that. All right, so the floor plan screen is quite custom in this app now because we have to adjust this floor plan for different events. And we also want to make sure that we can match up these markers to the agenda and to the exhibitor screens, so that when a user taps on a marker, they're taken to the appropriate session or the appropriate exhibitor. So the first thing you need to do to set up the floor plan is to add a new map. This is just an image. It's our standard interactive graphic component. So usually a PNG or an SVG will work. But when you name the map, you need to make sure that you include the name of the event at the start. So I think I called my event just event, and I would have to add an image. Let me just use one of our placeholders. And now I've added this map. So As long as the first part of the name matches the event name, you can see, for example, we have Partner Conference Floor 1, Partner Conference Floor 2. So you can have multiple, just the first part of that has to match. And now I need to go in and mark my map. I won't go into detail here, but you can add markers with different styles and colors, but the name again is the important part. So if I have a session that takes place in room 144, remember that when you add an agenda item, you set the location to be room 144. And I just need to make sure that I mark the map with the same exact name. For the exhibitors, you need to make sure that the beginning of the marker name starts with exhibitor, and the rest of it can be booth numbers or whatever you want to name it. And again, that functionality allows me, if I go back to the event list and go to, let's make sure we go to the partner conference here. This is a good example of a floor plan. If I name those markers correctly, when I come into the floor plan as a user, I can tap on this. I can click on this and see the sessions that are taking place in room 101. So these two sessions are both taking place in room 101. And conversely, if I'm in the agenda and one of these sessions is associated with a floor plan, I have a floor plan button, so I could go back to that screen. The exhibitors as well, again, if I have a list of exhibitors here, I can go to one of these and you can see I have exhibitor booth 1, 2, 3. I click on that and I see the exhibitor that, in this case, if there's only one, it will open the detail for the exhibitor right away. Fliplet is in that booth, and again, I have the booth button here. So users can navigate back and forth and really quickly see where things are physically present in the event with a floor plan. Okay. The other screens in the app that you may want to configure, the discussions have an option for sharing. You can see the share icon here, and when the app is published as a web app, you'll be able to see this allows them to basically send the URL for this specific post. They can copy it, they can send it to Facebook, LinkedIn, and a variety of different sources. If you want to turn that off, you would need to actually, in the Manage Discussion screen, you would need to actually remove this Enable Social Sharing field, because if this is checked, it will just automatically add that button. So if you don't want to allow anyone making a post to make their post shareable, you just delete that field out. And by default, discussions do allow anyone to add an item. This plus button shows up for everyone. If you need to modify that, it's in the list from data source in the entry management settings. So you can just adjust this here. A lot of users typically also want to turn off commenting or other features. You can do that in the social features. Another thing I should mention broadly about how a lot of these screens work is we are filtering these items by the event ID. So this is looking at a variable that's stored in the user's device based on the event they selected from the event screen called event ID. And every piece of data we have has event ID associated with it. Okay, and the Twitter feed screen may be another screen you want to configure. This does need to be done in code. It's very simple. However, if you click Developer Options and if you go to the JavaScript screen, you can just change the URL right here. So whatever your URL is for the Twitter feed that you want to use, you can add that here, or you can just remove the Twitter feed screen if you're not going to use it. I think that's all we need to cover in terms of modifying the screens and adding data manually. I will very quickly show you how to add data through the data sources. The events, you can see here we have all of this data. You can add it all manually. The one thing you will not add is the ID. This will be automatically generated after you save the item, so you can leave that column empty. Very similarly for the agenda, you can add all of the session data. You can see we have all of the columns here across the top. I won't go into each one of these, but again, there's a session ID that's going to be automatically generated So don't add anything in this column, just save it empty and we will generate that automatically. For the user list, this is there, again, information for the whole app. There's nothing really event specific here except for their personalized agenda. But the way users are given access to different events is with a new data source called event security. And you can very easily manually add this. So once you've added an event, you just need to have that event ID. And the role is pretty straightforward. Attendee, speaker, exhibitor is the user's roles, and then their email. So if you add their email, add their role, and add the event ID, you can manually just give them access to any event in your app. Most of the other data sources are pretty straightforward. Again, we do have in each of the event info, materials, all of those kind of items that you would have added manually through an admin screen. If you do add them in bulk, you do again need to use the event ID that was generated when you first added an event. So make sure you're always starting by adding the event itself in the events data source, and then you can add the other data as you see fit. And I think that will do it for today's demonstration on configuring the event template. If you have any questions, please reach out to Fliplet support. Thank you.